Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Founders Great, sponsored by Gaper.io. Today we have Gregory Shepard. Gregory is the founder and CEO of Boss Capital Partners. Gregory, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So, a brief background about yourself before starting Boss Capital Partners.
Sure. I am a serial entrepreneur, so I've built and sold 12 companies of my own, where I was the founder and the CEO and the whole deal the entire time. And then two other exits, so 14 in whole. And one of my companies was sold to eBay, Enterprise Marketing Solutions, and that led to a public company carve out. We bought 14 companies, sold 12, bought another one of my companies, and then that business sold as well. I've written 100 articles for 29 different publications like Forbes, Fortune, Entrepreneur, and so on, World News and Report, a lot of different publications. I'm a Forbes author for a book coming out next year, Forbes radio host. I've been on the news. I've do a lot of keynote speaking. I mean, you get the general idea. It's kind of feel like I'm talking about myself too much, but there's a lot there.
No, it comes with experience, right? So
Oh, I should say this. I've won four private equity awards for transactions between 250 and a billion. So that's probably pretty important.
So, Boss Capital Partners, what led you to becoming from an entrepreneur to an investor? You know, what was the main transition, the reason
Yeah,
behind
so I mean, honestly, as an entrepreneur, I developed this thing called BOSS, which stands for the Business Operating Support System. It's a framework and methodology that I use to build and sell companies. And I started in doing it for myself, and then I started doing it for investment companies that I had. Uh, because I've never, everything I've done has succeeded in an exit. I have a lot of investors following me, and I wanted to really help entrepreneurs. I got to a point where I was really concerned about wealth distribution, and I thought the best way I could do it is to help entrepreneurs succeed. And so that's what I started focusing on, and that led to, Boss and the book and everything about the business operating support system. And then I started seeing a ton of deals, and I was like, wow, these are really, really good things. These things should be brought out in front of people. So we started making investments, and then we created a syndicate out of that.
interesting, interesting. And how's the journey been so far?
It's been amazing. I mean, I see, probably 100 deals a month. We try to make an investment every 3 months. I try to help all the entrepreneurs along the way. They go to my website is gregoryshepard.com. And so they go there, submit their deals, and then there's tons of content in there that I write and stuff to try to help entrepreneurs. And so I feel like I am contributing and at the same time making investors happy. So
Wow,
it's going really well. Thank you.
all right, interesting. Uh, 2020 has been really crazy, right? So,
It's been nuts, but I've already had two exits this year. I had one in January for 48 million and one a few weeks ago for 75 million. So it's
yeah,
been crazy, but things are still moving.
that's amazing. That's amazing. So, in March, I remember in March, April of 2020, we were getting a lot of articles were coming out that the VC funding is dry down. That investors are even changing their investment thesis, right? So they're kind of like not betting on one space and the other. And there was a lot of uncertainty out there, right? Especially for the early stage companies that the funding is going to dry down, right?
Hmm.
Do you think the fear is still there or it has evolved over time?
I think that the way that people look at startups is broadly incorrect in the first place. When you are looking at a startup, you have companies that either make or save money. Those that make money take advantage of an opportunity, and those are bull market business startups. Those that save money are bear market opportunities, and those are businesses that are solving a problem. And so when you start to move from a bull market to a bear market like we are now, people coil in and they're not spending money. So an approach and a narrative around, making money is the wrong narrative. Those businesses aren't going to get funded. and they're not going to be very successful in this market. People want to know how to save money in this kind of a market. So if you want to be recession resistant, you need to change your narrative, not necessarily a pivot all the time, but sometimes a pivot to make sure that you're focused on, hey, we're here to save companies money. We're handling a problem in this, and that's a bull market opportunity. So generally speaking, I think the way you see the market and the type of startup you have and the way that you do your go to market and your narrative around how you're raising money will broadly impact your ability to be successful in capital.
Got it. Makes sense. Makes sense. Makes sense. So, and what advice were you giving to your early stage companies in March, April? And is the advice still the same, or if
That
you,
well, no, that was the advice. One of them was a make money bull market opportunity,
okay,
and they were taking advantage of an opportunity, basically maximizing an opportunity to make companies more money, right?
yeah,
So that wasn't a good opportunity at the time because the market was coiling in, right? So everybody was like starting to save money. They're thinking about saving money. How do they buckle down, right? And so we changed the narrative and we compared ourselves to some of the other options, reduced some of the pricing, changed the revenue model around, didn't change the product, just changed basically the narrative and the go to market a little bit. And that changed everything. And now the company's doing really well. So, it did affect us, but one of the things I do with the boss, the business operating support system, is do a war game. Something I learned when I was interviewing. I did 1,200 interviews. I interviewed the Navy SEALs, the CIA. I mean, just the first fighting wing of the Air Force, manufacturing, police, fire, everything, to try to figure out how they handle problems. And one of the solutions I came up with was, or I found, was wargaming. And wargaming is a process where you basically have a game board and you play out the future. So when this happened, we did a war game, played out the future, and we went with the best probable outcome, and that was the change in the narrative, and
mm.
it worked. People want to learn about that, they can go to my website. There's a lot of stuff on it there.
Oh, definitely. I think I'll be the first one logging onto it after the podcast.
Well, that'd be an
So,
honor.
so uh, since September 2019 last year, the co-working, the WeWork debacle started, right? And the business model has been under a lot of debate. So then COVID happened. So how do you see this co-working business model evolving post-COVID? So is it going to stick around, or is it going to go through a new wave?
No, I mean, people are talking about, a recovery after COVID and all this sort of thing. Anybody that's in the startup world knows that the best opportunities are the worst problems. So when you are looking at COVID, you're seeing a huge impact of something globally. Every country, every city, every state, and every individual are handling these problems differently. That means that there are a ton of opportunities out there surrounding COVID. So you're seeing that, right? We start to see a lot of, telemarketing, where you're working at home doing marketing campaigns, people that are doing dentist, doctor, educational. I mean, everything is happening at home. I mean, look what happened to Zoom. That's an indicator of a huge opportunity that's getting ready to bloom. We are, I think, as entrepreneurs, I mean, I think of myself as an entrepreneur, even though I'm an investor now. But, maybe behind seeking the problems and trying to find the solutions that are covered up in that problem.
Got it. Makes sense. Makes sense. So, I'm just kind of like overwhelmed with the knowledge. So I'm just kind of like keep on going. Like, so,
It's fine.
I usually don't get caught up in the podcast. Usually, yeah, I kind of, but I'm really enjoying the conversations over here. I just want to add a couple. So, remote work, the mental health, the creativity with the teams and everything. So, this is the next challenge, So, do you think that the post-COVID world, will the teams go back to normal, or will we have a
No.
hybrid?
Yeah, no, I mean, this is a permanent change. I mean, if you look, I wrote an article in World News Report about this, and what what I said in the report was something that I noticed when you start to see really large companies like Facebook and Twitter and all these cats start to say, yeah, well, we're okay with work from anywhere. What you start to see is a work from anywhere uh, display of people. Now, these people can work from anywhere, right? So normally these people have to work in these big cities, and there's a huge expense attached to working in big cities. But now they can work from anywhere. So you have somebody that used to work in San Francisco or New York or somewhere in the valley, and now they can move out to the small town that they've always wanted to live in and make the same money. It's going to highly impact those areas, those neighborhoods. You have high earners coming in. That's going to raise the values of the properties. There's going to be more cash moving in and out of the businesses, the small businesses, which is going to stimulate the economic ecosystem in small towns, and that's going to change big cities too. So you have these big cities with this all this office space that they're not going to need anymore, which is going to be a supply and demand issue. It's going to lower the prices. That's going to impact the market and those people that are invested in those office buildings. It's also going to mean that there's less people living there, which is going to impact the housing supply and demand rules, all of this. So there's a huge, huge impact, right, in that world. But on top of that, you start to see more and more use for tools and demand for tools that allow people to work efficiency and align and collaborate uh, in a work from anywhere environment. In addition to that, you start to see the impacts on the internet. Most people, I don't know how many Zooms a day, and everybody's like, well, my wife's on the Zoom working, my kids are on the Zoom going to school, my internet's choking. So you see the need to compress and speed up the transfer of information, not just through fiber, but the effects of that. Now you start to see more light moving through fiber. That means more heat. That means more sustainability problems. So now you start to see the ability to reduce the amount of heat that is being generated from this. This is what I mean by the opportunities. What I do is I call it pulling the thread, like a thread going through a shirt. If you pull the thread, it weaves in and out of all these other threads, and that fabric is the ecosystem that you're in. And if you pull that thread and follow it through, you can see the impacts of something like COVID throughout an entire ecosystem. Those impact areas and the threads that crosses through and crosses over are all opportunities. It can be a rabbit hole, but what you really want to do is stay on a single thread and follow it all the way to its origination. What's the origination? COVID. So you follow that through and you can start to see there's so many opportunities starting to bloom. I've already seen a huge increase in startups that are in the edge tech space and the work from home space, and people that are trying to compete with Zoom in different ways. And there's just obviously telemedicine and dental practices, and some of these things you're like, how is that? How do they do dental practices? But really, there are ways, people developing software and different things to enable these practitioners to take a closer look at stuff. It's really something.
All right, interesting, interesting. Gregory, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm pretty sure we could have talked for another half an hour, but my marketing team tells me I need to keep them within 15 minutes. So
It's all good. Thank you for your time. I hope you have a really good day. Thank you for
take
having me.
care of yourself and stay safe. Thank you.
All right, you too. Bye.